Hello everyone, it is Carol Garrison with Carol's Creative Escape, and today I am going to show you how to make a fun layered card using the Friendly Hello stamp set and designer series paper that comes in this year's January 4th to February 28th, 2022 Sale-a-Bration catalog. It is found on pages 12 and 13 in the catalog. And this is a free pair of items that you can get when you place a qualifying order of $100 or more. So again, you get both the paper and the stamp set when you place a $100 order before taxes and shipping. I had a lot of fun playing with this paper. You're going to see I've used a lot of the different patterns and designs in the card that I've created. And it is this card. I've got 3 different pieces of the designer series paper, and then I've used this stamp from the Friendly Hello stamp set, and my bird is perched a little bit funny. So on the card that I'm going to show you, I didn't like how it looked here. I'm going to turn it just a teeny bit, but it works just fine on this card. So we've got the Friendly Hello, and then we also have the designer series paper that coordinates with that. And again, the designer series paper is also called Friendly Hello. It's not often that both the stamp set and the paper have the same name, but let me show you the patterns that are in here. Typically our designer series paper have kind of a busy side and then a more neutral side. So I will start by showing you the busier side. This is just a series of colors: Pool Party, Fresh Freesia, Evening, Evergreen, Granny Apple Green, Pale Papaya, and I think that covers all of the colors in here. And then the dots are black, so basic black, and then white is kind of the background color. And then this vibrant set of stripes, and then we've got this all over pattern. Oh, I was going to turn it because the bird was upside down, but I guess it's kind of all over pattern, again pulling all those colors together again. And then we've got the Pool Party background with just black and white, and then we have the Fresh Freesia with more of the flowers and some of the leaves in the background. Pale Papaya, similar pattern with the flowers, and again just using black, white, and the color. And then the back sides, which tend to make great background pages and things like that for us. We've got Pale Papaya with just a white image of the flower. Granny Apple Green, again with those large floral images. You can make a card just using that if you cut it out right. Pool Party with smaller white flowers. Again, I think this would be a real pretty background. Then we've got leaves in Granny Apple Green and white. And then little flowers or buds of flowers and Pale Papaya. And then this just kind of all over splattered Fresh Freesia background. So very pretty paper. I think you can find you will do a lot of things with that. I decided today to work with lots of patterns. Kind of unusual for me, but I like how this card turned out. So to make this card, I've got the measurements here. Feel free to make a screenshot of that so you're able to see it if it will stay down. Let's see if I can get it to stay down that way. And I'll also tell you what those measurements are, and I'm going to show you how to make this card. I did something a little unique with my stamp in that I cut it out part way and then trimmed down my white so that part of the flower and leaf and then the bird's tail and the branch hang off, kind of floating in the air there. So I'll show you how I did that as well with the card. So let's start getting measurements. The base of the card is a piece of the Fresh Freesia, and it measures 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. And then I've got a piece of 5 1/4 by 4 for the inside of the card. The designer series paper to make the first layer is 4 by 5 1/4. And then I cut out a piece of Fresh Freesia that measures, sorry, I'll try to hold that down for you. It measures 1 3/8 by 5 1/4, and it has a corresponding layer of designer series paper that measures 1 1/8 by 5 1/4. And then I've cut out 2 squares of the fresh freesia that measure 2 1/4 by 2 1/4. 2 more pieces of designer series paper that measure 2 by 2. And then my last piece is for the bird image, and that measures, ultimately the square piece of it, this white part, is 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. But for stamping my image, I have a 1 3/4 by 2 3/4, and I'm going to show you how I finished cutting it out and then also cut it down to the 1 3/4. There might be an easier way to do it, but this is what worked for me. And so I'm just going to go in with my paper snips and do just a teeny bit of fussy cutting. That's what I did there as well. You don't want to cut big chunks out because we're not quite sure where our cuts are going to come from to finish the create the 1 3/4 square. So we just got to be a little bit careful of that. We know roughly 1/2 inch on each side, although this side will be less because that image was closer there. So just be careful when you're cutting that you're not cutting too far into the image. We can trim up what we need to, and that way you're not cutting big chunks out of the paper that we might need as part of that square too. Oh, come on. Just a little corner piece left there. Okay, get that out of the way. And I did stamp this ahead of time using the Memento Tuxedo Black ink. You're going to be surprised because I'm going to be using my watermarkers, my water brush on this, which normally I wouldn't do with the Memento ink because it tends to smear. So I did stamp it ahead of time so that it could dry. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just taking my paper cutter and I want the tip of the leaf to hang over. So this, in the paper trimmer, there's a trench or an indentation. That's the cutting line. So I'm lining my leaf up so it's just a skosh over that cutting line, just past the dark part and into the lighter part. I have the tip of my leaf going. And then I'm going to very carefully slide. I want to make sure this is on the screen here. Let me slide this up just a little bit. I am very carefully going to take and bring my cutter down. I go slow and just kind of slide it back and forth because I don't want to go down too far. And there we go. It popped right out. And then I'm going to repeat that process this way. And again, I'm going to go kind of slow so that I don't cut into my flower. And there we go. And I didn't cut all the way around that, so that isn't going to pop off. I kind of lucked out the first time through. So I'm just going to finish with the fussy cutting on that. Okay. And you do want to make sure you have nice straight edges here. So for me, I'm a horrible hand cutter when it comes to cutting straight lines. So it's worth it for me to take this step just to make sure that I've got a good square thing. So then the next thing that I'm going to do is I need to get to 1 3/4. And so the easiest way for me to do that is to line up this edge at the 1 3/4 mark. And then again, I'm going to just slide my cutting tool. And basically on your cutting blade, let me see if I can get mine to pop out here super easy. Come on. There we go. There is a line. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a line right there. And that lines up with the tip of the blade on here. But I really, really want to make sure I'm not cutting too far, so I am using that merely as a guide, but making sure that I stop short of where that's going to hit, because I do not want to cut into my bird too far. So I just keep going. That's far enough for me on this one. And then we will, again, keeping it lined up at 1 3/4. I'm going to come up from this side and just repeat the process. Again, going slow and checking back to see where my cut mark is. And I want to bring it just right up to the outline of the bird. That honestly is the hardest part of this card, and I'm confident you guys can do that. So then I'm just going to finish with the fussy cutting. And clean up that one spot. Okay, there we go. So now we're ready to color that. So again, it isn't hard. That's the one piece where you need to go and make sure you're going slow so that you don't overcut. All right, then to color this piece in, like I said, I'm using my water brush and my ink pads, and I'm actually using Crushed Curry, Pool Party, Fresh Freesia, and Granny Apple Green. And I need to make sure that I have a piece of scrap paper here because I want to wash my brush out in between colors. Now, because I did use the Memento ink is a water-based ink, and I'm using a water-based brush to move my color around. You want to go light on the water just to keep it from smearing. Typically, you want to use like our blends, which are alcohol-based markers, with Memento ink, which is a water-based, because the two will keep the black ink from smearing. In this case, I'm doing a water and a water, so you will get a slight, possibly a slight smear, and that's why I like to stamp my image ahead of time, because it does prevent a lot of that from happening. So I am going to start with Pool Party, and what you want to do is just squeeze your ink pad a little bit, and that'll add a little bit of ink to the lid of your ink pad. And I always check to make sure that my water brush is clean before I stick it in here. And you want to just squeeze a little bit. You can kind of see it coming down on the brush. And then I just start to pull color out to the edge. The more you pull it out, the paler it'll be. And I'm actually going to do my painting on here. Because I know I'm going to go off the color, or off the edge a little bit. I want to protect my work surface. I'll get the tail feathers. And I'm not doing anything fancy in terms of shading or anything like that with the bird. I'm just lightly adding a little bit of the Pool Party. And then, like I said, I'm going to squeeze just a titch of moisture in there and make sure that my brush is clear again. And next I'm going to do the Fresh Freesia. And I did load up my lid a little bit before I started this, so I don't need to add more color there. Just going to add a little bit of moisture, pull out some color, and I'm going to fill in the flowers. Not quite like when we were little and had those coloring books that had the magic color in it, so when you just used a wet paintbrush on it, you got color. But in this case, I just have to make my own color a little bit to create the magic. Like I said, you may see the black ink smear just a little bit. I don't worry too much about that. To me, it kind of softens up the image. And I am doing it this way because I don't own all of the blends in these colors. And I wanted a consistent look. And so in order to get that, I just had to use the ink pads that I had. If you had blends pens, you could use those as well. But like I said, I don't have all of the colors. And so I didn't want to create two different looks with my coloring. And I'm just going to grab a little bit of my yellow and get the center of the flowers. And you can tell that a lot of color gets held in the brush using this technique, so you don't have to load your brush up super heavy. All right, and then finishing off the leaves, I'm going to use my Granny Apple Green. And again, I've got enough in my lid. I don't need to add more color. And I'm choosing to color in this order because my green will run up next to the fresh freesia. And I found that if it was still damp, it kind of pulled at the fresh freesia color, like a magnet almost, pulled the color out. And so my branch ended up with a little bit of fresh freesia in it. And simply by changing the order that I did my colors, it eliminated that problem because the moisture just wasn't there. And you can see I kind of missed the line here a little bit. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, and so there, my coloring is done. Move ink pads out of the way, and I'm just going to do my cleaning of the brush. If you don't have these water painters, they're a lot of fun to use. All right, and then the other thing I'm going to do, as long as I've got my ink pads out, is I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the inside. I'll set that aside to dry. And to do that, because these are photopolymer stamps, you do want to use a stamping pad to stamp on. And I am using two different stamps on the inside. The first one is the leaves that are in the stamp set. And then the second one is Hope You Have the Best Birthday. Now I'm going to give you a little secret. I actually used 3rd generation stamping to get the Granny Apple Green. So I wanted it just to kind of be there, but in the background. And I'm going to hope that I get this placed in exactly the right spot, because I managed to stick this paper into some other color of ink at some point. And I won't have a backside to go to. So I basically stamped once, stamped twice, and then just came out here and tilted it and stamped a 3rd time. And that's how I got that green. Oh, and I don't really like that because I caught my edges. Yikes. All right, I have to quick cut a piece of paper. Hang on here, folks. And if I'd had the other side, I would have gotten it perfect. Fortunately, I have my trimmer here, and I can quick replace this piece of paper. All right, there we go. I can get rid of that, and I'll use it for something else later on. All right, let's try that again. So I'm inking it up, stamping once, stamping twice, and now stamping it perfect. There we go. That's exactly what I wanted. I will set that aside. And then I'm going to grab my fresh freesia ink pad again. And that is where I will stamp or color up my sentiment. Hope you have the best day. And then I'm just going to line that up kind of over the center. There we go. And for those of you that wonder, I'm not careless when I put my stamps onto my blocks. I like to put them on at an angle or crooked on the blocks, because then I focus on the stamped image itself when I'm trying to line things up on my cards instead of the edges of my blocks. That helps me get straighter sentiments as I focus on my stamp instead of the block, and then I end up with straighter alignment of my images. That's what works for me. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to assemble the card. The rest of this is going to go super quick. So first of all, of course, we want to put our inside piece in. And with our seal, remember, a light touch and a quick check mark type snap is all you need, and that helps keeping it from gumming up and snapping back at you a little bit. So I'm just going to center that on the inside of my card. I always like to give it a rub on the back side. Okay, and then we are going to layer our designer series paper. Like I said, not a lot of pressure on the roller. And that quick snap, and that has, for the most part, taken care of some of the gumming up issues I was having when I first learned how to use that type of roller. Okay, so there we go with that layer. And now I'm going to just run, actually, let me get rid of that altogether. A piece down the back of this. And I will add that. I'm turning my world upside down there. I will add this to here. And then again, I'm going to flip it over real quick. This designer series paper has so many fun patterns. I want to try to come up with a card using this as a focal point, because I think it's just so bright and cheery. All right, and I'm just sticking that on here. It's roughly a 1/2 inch in. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure your edges are lined up. All right, and then we're going to take this designer series paper, and we'll, looks like it's a better cut on that side. Add that to the center of our fresh freesia squares. Repeat that with this one. Again, line it up in the center. And then these two squares, I'm just going to kind of randomly, I shouldn't say randomly, but place on here so that spacing is kind of even for both squares. So let me add just a little bit of adhesive here, and I'll stick this one up here. I like it hanging over the edge of this piece just a little bit, because then you can still see. It seemed to get lost when I tried to line it up with the edges. Okay, and then this piece, again, I want to keep the spacing pretty consistent here, and here, and then here, and here. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. And that isn't really that close, Carol. Let's try that again. That's why I didn't press it down super hard the first time. Okay, we're going to leave it like that, because the more I fuss with it, the worse it's going to end up being. All right, and then I need to grab some dimensionals. I seem to keep losing the pack that I put out. I don't really know what's happening to them. But there's a full sheet. Maybe I can keep this one on hand. They're probably just lost in the mess of my desk. If you could see the area where I'm not filming, which is kind of the space just outside of what's in the frame here, I have a good mess going. That's how I tend to stamp. All right, so I'm going to take my bird, and now I'm just going to I am actually using more dimensionals than what I normally use. Just because I want to make sure I guess I'm only really using one more than what I would use, but I want to make sure that this piece really pops up. Okay, and then I'm going to center. The original layout I saw had the bird going here, but I thought it stood out more when I kind of put it offset in the squares like this. So that is what I'm going to repeat here. If you followed me at all for any length of time, you know I love Wink of Stella, and I really felt like this bird needed some glitter. So I am going through with my Wink of Stella, and I'm adding sparkle to my stamped image here. Sometimes the Wink of Stella will also cause the ink to smear just a little bit. Don't worry about that. We'll go out on the leaf. And now she just has a little bit of sparkle. All right, and then the next thing I'm adding are 3 of these iridescent rhinestones. These are just gorgeous. They add a little bit of sparkle, and they tend to kind of pick up the colors that are around them. So they're very flexible, I think, in how you use them. So I'm going to just grab one here, stick it down there. I should actually be using my take your pick tool instead of my fingers because they'll come off a little better. And then I'm going to grab a medium-sized one, and I put that, just double checking, oh, kind of right here. And then I've got the large size that I'll put just up here. Adds a little more sparkle. And then to finish it off, I am going to use a piece of the Fresh Freesia. It's the, what's this called? Open Weave. A piece of the Open Weave ribbon in the Fresh Freesia color. And again, I'm doing this just to add a little bit of pop to the card. I saved glue dots from my paper pumpkin kit. I also have a roll, but I'm not sure where I put that either. It wouldn't be stamping with Carol if she didn't misplace her things at least once or twice during the video. So these will work just fine, and I'm just going to pick off 2 of these and put them up in the corner here. And then I'm going to get the backing off. Come on. And then stick my little ribbon right there. And that is the complete card. So, again, very simple card. The hardest part is doing your cutting for this, and that isn't difficult. It's the first time I've ever done that, and it worked out just fine. So let me repeat my measurements for this card. The card base is 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. This first layer of designer series paper is 4 by 5 1/4. And then I've got a 1 3/8 by 5 1/4 piece of Fresh Freesia with a 1 1/8 by 5 1/4 piece of the designer series paper. These 2 squares measure 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 for the Fresh Freesia, and 1 3/4 for the designer series paper, 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. And the finished white square that you see here is 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. But my original piece was 1 3/4 tall by 2 3/4 wide, so that I could cut out around the stamped image. I hope that you enjoyed making this card. If you like what you see here, be sure to give me a thumbs up. If you know somebody who would enjoy this video, by all means, go ahead and share it with them. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you will see more fun projects coming up. So again, I'll show you the inside and the outside. I kind of like having that little bit of background behind that greeting. It's not something I do very often, and I need to do more of that. Again, thanks everybody for stopping by, and we will see you next time. Have a great week. Bye-bye.